Hi, we are going to discuss how to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. One method that is fairly confusing to students at times. It is something that requires you to understand what we call perfect square trinomials, and I gave you formulas here. I'm not going to get into too many details with that, but I will show you how to do that. Also, you need to know how to use the square root method for solving quadratic equations, because this comes up, and you need to make sure that you know this first. So if you don't, please watch a video on that. So what do? We're trying to complete the square. We're only interested in the first two terms, the quadratic term and the linear term. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have x squared plus 14. Now we need to figure out plus another value, and we need to figure out what that value is going to be. So how do we determine that? We are going to take the number in front of x. I'm sorry, I forgot x here. So we're going to take that number. So we're going to take 14 divided by 2, and we're going to square that. So whatever that number is, we are going to add that number. And here's where we need to be careful, because when we add a number here, we don't have the same equation anymore. So 14 divided by 2 is 7. 7 squared is 49. Right? I have a very good... Hold on one second. Let me get better. So 49. So 49 is what we brought in that we did not have. So if we want to keep our equation in balance, we need to subtract 49, right? And then I'm going to copy minus 51 equals 0. So without that, that's still the same equation, right? So what does that do? This will give you x plus 7 squared. And then we have minus, so that's this, right? And then minus 49 minus that will give you minus 100, gives you 0. So we're going to have x plus 7 squared. We can solve it by using the square root property. We move 100 on this side. And then we're going to get x plus 7 equals plus or minus square root of 100, which is 10. So x plus 7 equals plus or minus 10. So we have x plus 7 equals 10, which gives you x equals 3, or x plus 7 equals negative 10, which gives you x equals negative 17. Alright? Let's do another problem. This one, so we have x squared minus 2x minus 3. We are interested in these only. So we're going to have x squared minus 2x. So we're going to do negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. You square that, that's 1. So plus 1. Bringing that plus 1. So we have to subtract 1. And we're going to still have minus 3 equals 0. Remember, whatever I basically add the same number and I subtract the same number without this. This is our original equation. So what does that do? This here is a perfect square trinomial. So it's x minus, because there's a minus here, minus 1 squared. Minus 1 minus 3 is minus 4. So we have x squared minus, x minus 1 squared equals 4. Continuing here, x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 4. X minus 1 equals plus or minus 2. X minus 1 equals 2. X minus 1 equals negative 2. We're going to end up with 3, and we're going to end up with negative 1. Correct? So you have this equation here. I know in some situations when we solve quadratic equations, we want it to be in standard form, but when you use the completing the square method, it doesn't matter. We are going to take that equation as is. So we have k squared minus 12k, that's what we're interested in. So we divide negative 12 by 2 and we square that. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6, square that, you get 36, so plus 36 and then minus 36, and then copy all the other stuff. Okay, so again, without that, it's the same equation. But we are interested in these three terms. That's a perfect square trinomial, so it's k minus 6 squared. What do we have here? Minus 36 plus 30 is minus 6 equals 7. So we have k minus 6 squared equals 13. It's not a perfect square, but that does not really matter. You can still solve it. So k minus 6 equals plus or minus square root of 13. So then k is going to be 6 plus square root of 13. And k is going to be 6 minus square root of 13. Okay? Moving on. So you're hopefully getting the idea. So what do we have here? We have t squared minus 4t plus 6 equals 0. So we're going to write t squared minus 4t. So we have to take half of negative 4, which is negative 2, and square that. That's positive 4. And I'm going to subtract 4. And then I copy all the other things we had. Same as the original equation. We are interested in this. So t minus 2 squared minus 4 plus 6 will give you plus 2 equals 0. So we have t minus 2 squared equals negative 2. So we're going to have to take the square root of a negative number. So t minus 2 squared equals square root of negative 2. T minus 2, I'm sorry, there's no square anymore, and there's a plus minus. Okay, so t minus 2 equals plus or minus I square root of 2, and we're going to get t equals 2 plus I square root of 2, and t equals 2 minus I square root of 2. These problems sometimes create a challenge because, of course, it's nice when the number in front of x or t or m is even, because then you divide it and you get a whole result, but here you don't. But it can still be done. So m squared plus 5m. So what do? We do 5 divided by 2 and square that. That is going to give you 25 over 4. Right? I forgot to use a different color. 25 over 4 minus 25 over 4, and then followed by everything else. Doesn't matter if it's not in standard form, it will not make a difference for completing the square. So again, without that, it's the same thing. We are going to group these terms. So this is going to be m plus 5/2 squared minus, all right, so what do we have here? We have some operations with fractions involved. This is negative 25 4 plus 10. Negative 25 4 plus 10 is going to give us negative 25 4 plus 100 4s, right? So it's plus 75 4s equals 6. We need to subtract it now, so it's going to be 6 minus m plus 5/2 squared equals, so we're going to have to do 6 minus 75 4s. 6, it's 36 minus 75, right? 36 minus 75, that is going to give us minus 39 fourth, minus 39 fourths, correct? So continuing here, it's going to be m plus 5/2 equals plus or minus square root of negative 39 fourths. So it's going to be m plus 5/2 equals plus or minus, this is going to give us I square root of 39 divided by 2, and we're going to have m equals negative 5/2 plus I square root of 39 over 2, and m equals negative 5/2 minus I square root of 39 divided by 2. Okay, and I have one more example. What happens when the leading coefficient is not 1? This is actually when students are often concerned. So what we're going to do, well, first of all, we need to move 8x on the same side. So it's going to be 3x squared minus 8x. We don't have to worry about the 4. I'm going to leave it there for now. So first of all, we're going to have to factor out the 3. So it's going to be 3 times x squared minus 8/3 x. And now we need a number. So what is that number going to be? If you ignore that, so it's the same process. So you take 8/3 divided by 2, that's 4/3, right? Negative 8/3 divided by 2, and you square, so it's negative 4/3, which is going to give you 16 thirds, right? 16/9, I'm sorry. 16/9. Okay, so we remember we added something here. Let me do that. But we have to subtract, but we did not add 16/9. What we added here is 3 times 16/9. So 3 times 16/9 is 16/3. So what we need to do is we need to subtract 16/3. And then we copy equals negative 4, right? So what do we have? We have 3 times, this is going to be x minus 4/3 squared minus 16/3 equals negative 4. So 3 times x minus 4/3 squared equals, we're going to bring that on the other side, 16/3. So it's going to be negative 4 plus 16/3. It's negative 12/3 plus 16/3, which is 4/3. So this is going to give us 4/3. Now we're going to multiply both sides by 3. Well, yeah, actually we're going to divide, both sides by 3, so that we can leave the squared quantity by itself. So that's going to give us x minus 4/3 squared equals 4/9. Use the square root property. X minus 4/3 equals plus or minus square root of 4/9. X minus 4/3 equals plus or minus, this is actually nice, it's 2/3. So x is going to be 4/3 plus 2/3, which is 6/3, which is 2. And x equals 4/3 minus 2/3, which is 2/3. And there we go. This is how it's done. Hope this helps.